Welcome back, everyone, to the channel. I just want to say I appreciate you guys being here for just a couple of minutes of your day. I appreciate you guys. This is a book review of a Stephen King book. I don't know. I just felt like doing Stephen King. I haven't talked about a Stephen King book in a minute, so I want to talk about one I really enjoyed. And Peep the Fit. Yeah, flannel, cool hat. I'd rather be ghost hunting. I don't know what that has to do with anything for a book review, but I just wanted to, I don't know what's going on with me today. Anyways, we're going to be talking about Misery. Anyone else just feel the misery? Misery. It's like really good. It's a cult classic. Like even the movie is, and that's rare. Like I'm pretty sure out of all Stephen King's like movie adaptations, there's only been like 3 that I could think of that I've actually seen that was like, ooh yeah, bangers. Misery, Stand By Me, The Shining. Those are the only thing I could think of. If you guys know any more, let me know down below. I think the It movies were okay. They kind of like took away the horror and just made it funny. That was my biggest beef with it. We're not talking about like movies of Stephen King or anything. We're just going to talk about Misery because that's what we all are nowadays. We're just miserable. So we're going to talk about Misery. I haven't read Misery in a long time. I just remember it because it's just always been locked in my head, and it's a pretty simple story to like remember. It's just a really fun, terrifying thing. When you start off with the book, it literally just starts off with like, I'm your number one fan. I'm your number one fan. And that really sets the tone to me reading this. I read this book when I was 21, so almost, well, 7 years ago now. But when I read this book starting out, all I heard was how good it was. I just didn't know how actually good it actually was. Because, you don't know. This book was an absolute banger. Now, what I do in these reviews is I always go from the good and the bad, like what I likes and dislikes. So we're going to start off with the likes first, because the dislikes are very few and far between. The likes are a lot. And so what I like about Misery is I do enjoy the premise of just being self-isolated and you actually just can't do anything. I love that so much. Like Paul Sheldon, oh, spoilers by the way. Spoilers. I do like that Paul Sheldon does like, because you're just with Paul Sheldon and Annie Wilkes through 95% of this story. And I do enjoy that Paul Sheldon is useless. He gets in a car accident and he gets saved by Annie, which is, at first I'm like, oh, that's really cool. But then, you realize she's actually just crazy. You just, you're like sitting there every time you're reading, you're like, oh my gosh, dude, what's going to happen to Paul? Because though he can't do anything. He literally is bedridden for a lot of the book until Annie helps him to get in a wheelchair to help him write and so on and so forth. And the movie does a pretty good job at portraying a lot of these things that he is dealing with, I thought. Granted, they weren't like as violent as the books, which is fine. Usually that's how it is, but like with this premise of this whole series and this book, I just really enjoyed the way that Stephen King wrote good old Paul. Just the whole time he is just trying to figure out how to get away from Annie. Annie makes him rewrite his book called Misery, because it's one of the main characters in the book is named Misery, and Paul Sheldon was like done writing it because he was just tired of writing the same series, so he just wanted to expand, which I could understand, But Annie was not a fan of it, so she gave him a typewriter when he was able to like set up, and he would type and type and type and type and type, and she would read it and get all excited, or sometimes she'd get really mad about it, and I'm like, oh man. Throughout this book, there's sometimes where she like punishes him like he's like a child if he does certain things and she's not home, and I'm like, this is not good. I like the I like the self-isolation of this book, where it is just Paul and Annie, and Paul has to try to figure out a way to like survive. And I just like the premise. At first when I was reading it, this might be interesting, but when I was first reading it, I actually was getting really bored of the book. I don't know why. Every time I was reading it, I was like, oh, here we go again. As I've matured in my reading, I realize how good Misery really is, and just how unsettling this whole book is. Like at first I was like, it's kind of boring. Yeah, Annie Wilkes is just sitting there calling you a doo-doo brain and all that stuff. But then I like when you start thinking about how good this book really is, I'm like, actually, this all makes sense. Because she's like, there's a lot of things unstable with Annie, and I like that premise with this whole book. It's just a fun book to read. And yeah, he like this horror porn, like the horror is all right. Like there's parts where you're like, holy crap. That's what was going on with me with some scenes. I'm like, holy crap. And it's not like a monster. And I like that when Stephen King writes. He doesn't write like actual monsters. Some books he does have monsters, but most of the time monsters are just human beings because humans can naturally just be bad people. And I like that with this book because Annie Wilkes isn't like an actual monster. She isn't like Pennywise or anything. She's just a human being. Sheldon can't do anything about it. Of the dislikes, literally, it's just like one. And it's not even a dislike anymore because I really did enjoy this book. I gave this book a 5 stars. Even when I read it back then, I was like, dang, this book's actually a banger. And nowadays, I recommend it to everyone. But like my dislike, and I don't even think it's a dislike anymore because now now when I think about the part, it actually made a lot of sense why he was doing it. But he was showing you like parts of the book Misery that Paul Sheldon wrote in this book to show just like what's going on, how she faked her death, and she was like coming out of the coffin because they thought she was dead, but she actually wasn't dead, and all of that. And the way that he was doing all this, it was just really cool to read into the mind of what Paul Sheldon was writing through this whole book. And I didn't at first. I was like, why am I reading this? Why are we reading this? Like that was my thought process. But once you actually think about it, you're like, it builds more to the story, and that's what Stephen King's really good at doing. Is just he's really good at cooking. Let the man cook. There's sometimes though when I'm reading his books, I'm like, all right, dude, you gotta chill. Like you're going too deep. But like with Misery is a pretty short book too, and that's what I like about it. It's like I think it's almost 400 pages somewhere around there, so it is a pretty quick read. In general, you could probably read it over a weekend if you really want to, especially during. I don't know why, but I feel like Misery is like the best kind of book to read for January and February because it's like the colder months, and mostly in January if you're like living when there's snow, you're usually self-isolated anyways because of how bad the snow can be. Same thing with The Shining. Those two I think you could read in January and just be like, ooh, nice. They're not cozy reads, they're terrifying, but that's like the fun of it. But like I said, I don't really have any dislikes. That was an old one when I was first reading it, and then as a reader, you grow to appreciate really good books and everything in it. Because at first you're like, this book's not very good, but then you like actually appreciate how good it really is and why it is. And that's kind of what Misery did to me. Over the years, I used to not put Misery in like my top 5 favorite Stephen King novels. Now it's like, yeah, I think Misery could definitely be in top 5. I thought about rereading Misery before I did this review, but I just remember everything that happens, and I don't really want to reread it even though I know what happens, because it's just like, I feel like it would take away like the fun of it. But with Misery though, I did really enjoy it. I thought about doing an audiobook, maybe I'll do that, but all in all, I really did like Misery. I think everyone should definitely check it out. And I also wanted to talk about Stephen King for a hot minute just because I really like Stephen King. And I just haven't, I realized on my videos, I haven't posted a Stephen King book review in a while. I think the last one was The Shining. Yeah, I think so. So I figured, why not just talk about probably one of his greatest books. Like everyone always talks about like The Stand and It as like his greatest novels, but dude, Misery is definitely up there. It's not his best. It's not his best, but it's up there, dude. I'm telling you, it is up there. If you guys made it to the end of the video, I do appreciate it. Make sure you guys check out all my socials down below, and make sure you guys stay safe, stay hungry, and tell someone you love them. I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.